welcome everyone. This is another privilege of mine to interview people that I respect and admire and have never had a chance to connect. Amy Fast is somebody who I've known online for a number of years, but I've never actually had even a conversation. And we just finished saying that she's on the list of people I really want to meet someday. I'm not counting this as the meeting time. So it's the best we can do for now. But anyway, Amy, would you just please do a quick introduction of yourself, and then let's just get in chatting here.
Sure, yeah. So, Amy Fast, and I am a first year principal in McMinnville, Oregon. It's funny because my first year, funny might be not the correct word, but my first year as a teacher, my very first week of my first year was September 11th, 2001. So I kind of entered this profession during a week of great crisis for our country, of course, and now my first year as principal. Here we are in a global pandemic. So it's been quite the journey. I was a elementary teacher actually for 10 years. I taught fourth and fifth grade, and then I was an instructional coach for 5 years, and I coached teachers at the elementary and middle school level, an assistant principal at the high school level then for 4, and here I am as a principal of that same high school. So I've kind of seen the whole K-12 spectrum, a huge advocate for public education, and that's kind of my jam.
Yeah, and again, for those of you who don't know Amy, which I can't believe there would be people who wouldn't know you, but let's just say there are.
You give me too much credit.
She is a tremendous follow on Twitter, and really, again, this is sort of where I think we have a kindred spirit in sort of our heart for the what matters conversations in education. And then we're in a time really where we're actually I think having to ask those questions and seeing and finding out for ourselves what really matters. One of my initial questions for people, and again, I'm trying to get people from different parts of the world and different states, and so give me the Oregon experience in terms of what are teachers being asked to do during the crisis right now? What's their mandate for the next few weeks, months moving forward?
Sure. So our school, the last day of school for us was March 13th, and we had a premature spring break, and then an actual week of what was to be our spring break. And then the guidance from the Oregon Department of Education when we returned from that break was that we were going to engage in remote learning opportunities for students. And the plan was to return to school on the 28th of April. And so students could choose to take advantage of those opportunities or choose not to, but basically teachers would be tasked with pushing out some sort of remote opportunities. And then, of course, administrators stay up all night trying to put together what that might look like. And then at midnight, right, the day after we push out the plan for that, ODE, Oregon Department of Education, comes out with, just kidding, we are now going to be doing legit distance learning for all, which means, of course, now we're making sure that we're providing faith to our students in special education, make sure that we're providing some sort of credit earning opportunities at the middle and high level, and of course, as we should be even during the remote learning, ensuring that we're able to provide equity of access to that online or paper packet material for all students. So teachers kind of had some professional whiplash going on for the last couple of weeks of, we're doing this, just kidding, we're doing this, just kidding, we're doing this. And the tricky part is we have to be acting fast on behalf of our students to ensure that they're getting at the very minimum the relational supports that so many of them count on. We're a high poverty school district, and those connections with teachers just can't be overstated. And yet we're oftentimes pushing out that instruction, that teaching, without knowing what the guidance is yet. So we have at our high school, we're a pretty comprehensive high school. We have 2,200 students, 17 career pathways, like 50 college credit classes, dual credit classes. So the real tricky part for our admin team has been kind of teasing apart, what does fabrication look like right now? What does it mean that we're giving pass incomplete grades to 9th through 12th graders for high school credit, but we're still doing A through F for college credit? So all the interesting part is the school part is so much trickier than the education part, which is ironic to even have to tease those two words apart, I think. But where we get hung up and where we get kind of clunky is in the school piece. When we drill down to just what does it mean to get a quality and give a quality education, it becomes so much more simple. So that's what I keep trying to bring us back to is let's forget all the game of school for a sec. Like let me worry about that. Let our admin team kind of tease that apart with the Oregon Department of Education. As teachers, let's just get back to the foundation of what does it mean to provide students with a quality education. And that's where I think some of the burden has come off their shoulders a little bit.
Well, and again, I think you've done a nice job of sort of helping me understand. And then this is where everybody's sort of facing the edicts from the on high people. So in your case, the Department of Oregon Education. But then you play, and your team, and your administration team, play such a significant role in filtering and messaging that to teachers, because you are their first line of tell us what to do, what's this supposed to look like. So can you be specific around, how you've messaged this to teachers? Again, you've outlined the idea of let's talk about what learning is, what an education is, outside of the parameters that the school part has. But what have you tried to do to message to help teachers feel better equipped and better prepared to do their job?
Right. Well, I think always with messaging, it's important first for us as admin to be vulnerable. And when we don't know what's happening, or we're struggling, or we're losing sleep, or we're trying to figure out, be honest about that with them. Every Sunday prior to this, I always put out a messaging called the Grizzly News. It's just most so that teachers can prepare for the week. And in that, I have what's called a mindset moment, and I just either share things that are on my mind or do a little storytelling. But basically, to frame it all, I talked a lot about how, and I think you've probably seen some of this out there, especially on Twitter, but I always say, I quote the Gallup research that, hope is a better predictor of success than a student's SAT score, their GPA, their standardized test score. So really during this time more than ever, our role is to be ambassadors of hope. So I talk a lot about the importance of maintaining and investing in that relational capacity we have with students. So our first, I think focusing on putting one foot in front of the other instead of going full-fledged like distance learning right out of the gate was something that we did that was successful. So this first week, we're going to all look at our fourth period rosters, and we're just going to focus on touching base with all of those families. And we're going to check to see how they're doing, what's going on in their lives that they might be feeling overwhelmed with right now. How can we as a school support that, whether that's with providing meals, whether that's with making sure they're signed up to get a Chromebook or a hotspot. It's basically giving the families a sec to breathe and, see that we're going to spend a little time on the front end just preparing them for what's coming with this learning so that A, they're not overwhelmed, and then B, teachers can just focus on keeping that relationship with those families dialed, so the families know that they are a support and that our staff understands who has access to what, so that we can work to get them what they need. That was just the very first step. And what's amazing is, no disrespect at all to high school teachers, but I think when they have some of them 200 students or whatever, they're not always as well versed with interfacing with families on a regular basis as elementary teachers sometimes are, who have 25 in their class or 30 in their class. So it was so inspiring to hear what our teachers' experiences were with touching base with those families was. And so there's so many teachers that came away with a heightened empathy for what our students are dealing with in their lives. And, those students have likely been dealing with those life events or family circumstances for quite a while, but we just didn't really know because we were in the daily grind of school. So there was that piece that I think was really beneficial. And then the next step was to try to work in teams to plan either course-alike activities or lessons or engaging plans for their families for the next week, or interdisciplinary ideas. And I think that was also something that was challenging for our staff because we have so many singletons, so many teachers. I think we have 50 some teachers who teach things that no one else in the school teaches. And so their experience with collaborating with their colleagues was limited. Of course, they talk about instructional strategies and whatnot during the year, but to really set aside, like, here's my standards I need to get through, and here's the tests we have coming up, and really focus on, like, how can we combine our expertise and our care for students to put something out there that really is of value for families right now. And I think that the learning curve for them on that was a little steep, but also what they have done these past few weeks is going to forever change, I think, the way in which we collaborate, especially at the high school level.
Yeah, I mean, those are the what a picture you paint there of the opportunities for. And again, I think high school teachers sometimes get a bad rap for being too content focused, but I mean, it's just the structure. When you, like you say, you have 200 people, I can't have relationships with 200 kids the way that an elementary teacher can have a relationship with 25 kids that they're with all day long, right? So I mean, it's not a fair comparison. So but I mean, what an opportunity. So what about you? Can you share, because you've had to do this same thing with your staff. Now, mind you, as a staff, you're going to know your staff probably better than they would know these 200, because you don't have 200 people to have to manage. But what have you learned in terms of the empathy that you don't have to, and I'm not, without revealing anything, obviously personal, but just in general, thinking about, wow, it helped me understand my staff in a way I didn't maybe get before. So what have you learned as a leader?
Yeah, well, so I actually have 200 staff, and so I think what I've learned the most is how incredibly important it is to be, like, when I think about being in the building, I kick myself for the amount of times I skirted the visibility priority to get stuff done, to get my to-do list done in my office. And I knew better. You hear about it all the time in in admin training and from mentors and whatever, but it's no joke, the to-do list in this role. It just is, it's forever growing, and it weighs on me when it's not getting done, because I'm a person who likes to be efficient. But the biggest challenge for me has been being quote unquote visible or present for not just for all staff, but for each and every staff member, so that they feel seen during this time and they feel supported. And so I think I took for granted, I think I expected a higher level of comfort with some of our tech platforms than people were actually feeling at the time we moved to distance learning. And so the grace that we are extending our staff right now is so crucial. Having them feel vulnerable enough to say, I've never gotten on a Google Classroom. I don't know how to do that. You know what I mean? Or I don't feel comfortable being on video. I have, some of my own concerns about that make me uncomfortable. And really, really hearing that and being willing to problem solve with them and make sure that they understand that there's no judgment, there's no evaluation component of this. There's just support. And I've got some insecurities during this time too. Obviously, as a first-year principal, I'm like, how do I pull off graduation? How do I make sure these compliance-based measures are getting taken care of with the Department of Education? All these things. But my role right now, I'm finding, and I always believe this to be my role before, is really the chief storyteller. So my job is to highlight the greatness that's happening right now, and not just greatness in terms of, instructional technology or even staff that are putting themselves out there and reaching out to families, but just the greatness in terms of people's mindsets and the ability to be flexible and give themselves grace and roll with the punches. I mean, I just want to keep highlighting that which I think matters most during this time, both mindset and skill set. And that means, painting the picture for staff of the things that almost bring me to tears, the people collaborating who didn't even talk in the halls before, the people trying and failing on, these Google platforms. The failing forward piece is just, it's cool that we have staff members who are 60 years old. I mean, not that that's old, but who are on their last year, are going to retire in June, and for the first time ever are getting in a Google Classroom. It just makes me want to cry. That's what it means to be a learner, and they're modeling for that for their students. So I think highlighting that for our staff and our highlighting the greatness I'm seeing from them and our students to our whole community, I think is my primary role right now.
Well, and again, you do a tremendous job of telling those stories, and I often highlight and share the stories that you share, because you do a great job of that. So kudos to you, and continue to do that. So shifting gears a little bit, you're also a mother of children who are going through this as well. Can you talk about, just as from a parent's perspective, what's this like? And you can, juggling both of these things of trying to do this thing from a parent perspective as well, because I'm sure that adds to the empathy capacity quite a bit.
Well, it's great timing for that question, because just last night I had to apologize to my whole family for not being a very kind mother. I lost my patience, because I'm trying to work 15-hour days. I'm trying to keep some kind of structure and schedule, keep the house clean, make sure that my kids are accessing their own learning, and I'm not doing it all very well. I mean, I'm not balancing it very well, and so it takes its toll. And my husband's a great help, but he's trying to work right now as well, and it's a total struggle. So I think for me, I'm really bad when it comes to I was diagnosed with as being a perfectionist when I was a teenager, and I actually quit going to therapy because I said, I'm not a perfectionist. I couldn't be. I'm perfect. I couldn't have that that diagnosis, which is kind of a joke, but at the same time, I'm someone who empathizes with people who are struggling right now, because I'm really hard on myself, and I'm not pulling it all off. I'm not doing it all well. And I think what my kids are learning right now is, ironically, even though we're all quarantined together, they're learning a lot of independence during this remote learning time. I think there's value in that. I was on a conference call, and my son was trying to get on a Zoom, and I couldn't help him because I was on my own call, and he has to troubleshoot. He has to problem solve. He has to read the directions. He's got to reach out to his teacher via email, and he did. And sometimes, parents or teachers, we swoop in to help, and maybe it's that leaning into that struggle and having to be independent that's going to benefit them in the long run. But I have to remind myself, I'm such a better educator than I am a parent. I sometimes have to take my parent hat and say, like, what would the Amy who's a principal and teacher say to the Amy who's a parent right now? And I get so high-centered on, making sure my kids aren't falling behind in their classes, and they have the master the standards they need to be successful next year. And then I realize as a principal, that's not the advice I'm giving the parents in our community right now. It's not the advice I'm giving the teachers. I want people to harness and leverage this time to really capitalize on the things that matter most. And as a parent, I'm sometimes not doing that. And so
Yeah.
I think it's just constantly reflecting on, am I walking my talk as a parent that I do as an educator? And sometimes I'm not. And that's the biggest rub for me right now. And I think I'm going to grow from this experience personally, probably even more than I am growing professionally, because there was a little bit of a disconnect between the professional Amy and then the personal Amy. And I think that I'm going to learn a lot about how to invest in my own health during this time. You know, I started going for runs again, which I had neglected since I became an administrator, trying to take much better care of myself in terms of how I'm eating, because I'm finding if I don't, I'm just not gonna make it. You know what I mean? Not to be dramatic,
Yeah.
but it's too hard to balance it all right now.
No, and what a great thing to be able to share back to your staff, to your parents, to students around, like, yeah, like this is like, here's how I'm struggling, and you're faced with the realities that, you know, every parent in your school is facing, or many of them for sure are facing. So I love your reflection around that one. That's such a powerful thing. Just a couple more questions before we close. What, you know, you've got this sort of somewhat temporary plan in place of moving forward. As you sort of project, and again, I'm thinking this beyond you know, this school year, and you're gonna have, you know, you mentioned graduation as being like, how's that even gonna work, kind of thing. But like, what challenges do you concern you most moving forward, if this has any kind of length beyond just this, what we're thinking of as a temporary thing? What are you kind of concerned about? Like, I'm not sure we're going to be able to solve this, or this is the part that kind of keeps me up at night.
Right. Well, I think, you know, there's obviously logistical things like forecasting kids for next year's classes and graduation, and all those pieces are really keeping me up at night. But there's also a few other things that we've just kind of swept under the rug that I don't think we can keep sweeping under the rug after this, like our grading practices, homework, you know, things that we just kind of not intentionally turned a blind eye to, but definitely were made more transparent, and the curtain was pulled back on by this whole pandemic. Like we talk about, we can't penalize a student via the grade they get based on, you know, their access to technology at home. But, you know, we often ask students to do homework that requires technology, and that homework then impacts their grade. So I think, and grading is a hot button topic at the high school level, as is homework. So I think that's one piece. I'm not losing sleep on it right now, but I know will have to be a discussion moving forward.
Yeah.
You know, whenever we return to school as usual. The other piece is, I think I always discuss the importance of having this kind of well-rounded education. And what I mean by that is, especially at the high school level, like the importance of extracurriculars and athletics, and having a niche for all students to be able to find something they're passionate about and really invest in that and have that sense of purpose. And when you drill school down to like the bare bones of the most essential teaching and learning, you really realize how important those other parts of school are. And so I'm extremely worried about the impact on athletics. I'm extremely worried about the impact on clubs, on dances, on assemblies, because all those parts of school, albeit super traditional, they exist for a reason, and those traditions are often what keep kids' heads in the game and make them feel like a significant part of it all, and get them excited for the next thing coming, you know, down the pipeline for them during the school year. So I worry about losing some of those parts of school that really make it fun and special for kids. I think that's really weighing on me right now. I didn't, you know, that's one of the parts I love about being a high school principal, and B, I also didn't realize how much I would miss just chatting with kids at a basketball game, or, you know what I mean? I dread chaperoning dances, dread it, and I would give anything right now to have a dance at school. You know what I mean? So
yeah. No, I have, no one's articulated that to me, and that's a really, I need to think about that more, because there's so much in there around that. I mean, just the idea of, and one of my colleagues wrote a blog post about, I miss the chit chat, right? Like I miss just because somebody also said, we've been more efficient now. Like technology has this efficiency, which is great. but that chit chat, that all that banter, that stuff that seems superfluous, that seems like minutia sometimes,
Right.
is at its core
It's
the
really
human
the
experience,
foundation.
right? And
Yep.
and all of these structures in place are built around that kind of thing. So last question, what's your hope? What's your hope that comes out of this that says, you know what, for all of this, this is what I hope lingers and lasts beyond?
So all my work has been around the purpose of education. And I think we've had the purpose of education wrong for quite a while. My hope is that we come together to reevaluate what is the purpose of schools, what is the purpose of education, and realize that there was so much more to it than just um, academic skills and knowledge. And while I cannot, I really don't want to discredit the importance of academic skills and knowledge. I'm a huge proponent of the highest expectations for students in that realm. It is not the only realm that we should be addressing in schools. And I talk a lot about how, for me, I envision the purpose of schools as this triple Venn diagram, and this with the sweet spot being right in the middle, and that being the purpose of a public education. But one of those circles is absolutely academic skills and knowledge. Another circle is those foundational schools or skills, sorry, or people refer to as SEL or building character, those professional skills that are harder to measure, but not impossible, like teamwork and leadership and communication, all those pieces. And then the last circle being a student's intrinsic drive, really that want to learn and that motivation. And I really envision the sweet spot of our purpose being right in the middle of those three things. And so my hope is at the end of this experience, we take a breath and before we just jump right back into, the metrics that we've had and the way in which we go about school, we look at, what is the greatest purpose that will leverage the most success and fulfillment for students and for society, and then how do we reimagine what that could mean, both in terms of our metrics and in terms of our practices in schools moving forward.
Well, the good news is for me is that people like you will, I know, help see that those conversations are had, and I think collectively as a profession, I'm hopeful that people are seeing the same things and taking that pause time, and maybe just even having this summer break and then articulating and thinking through these ideas will enable us to re-engage them in a really purposeful way come fall. So thank you so much for doing this. I know with your busy 15-hour day and the bad parenting that you've
Right.
I don't want to call you out, that you've taken time to do this, which maybe you shouldn't have done. So anyway, I just thank you so much for doing this, and I really value your contributions to my own learning through Twitter, and so your storytelling skills are exemplary, and I congratulate you for all the work you've done, and wish you well.
Well, thank you. This is actually very helpful to me because it grounds me in my why and helps me to reflect. And it's been a pleasure to meet you in person. So,
yeah, we'll do
thank you.
We'll do this in another way at some point, hopefully soon.
For sure. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.